And last but certainly not least, it's the preview of the last game of the first round playoffs in this season MLS, and it's between Minnesota United versus the LA Galaxy. Now, there's no doubt that a lot of people are going to keep an eye on this game for one big reason, which is they get to finally see Zlatan play in the playoffs, and that after 2 seasons of us hoping that we'll see Zlatan in the playoffs, and that last season we weren't able to see that thanks to the epic choke job that the Galaxy did on decision day. Now we are of course going to see him play in the playoffs, and that there's no doubt that there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to perform, and that a lot of people are definitely very excited to see what kind of amazing things that he is going to do in this game, and that whether or not if he's going to rewrite history in the playoffs too. I mean, the bigger the game is, it seemed like that's when Zlatan usually show and just turn into his own show. So it's going to be interesting to see if that, of course, is the case. But I'll kind of also explain the fact that, it's at the same time, as much as people are kind of hyped up about the fact that Zlatan is definitely going to show up and he's going to prove why he's the best player, not only in MLS, but in MLS postseason history. There's definitely still a little unpredictability because we never seen Zlatan in the playoffs before. Now, in terms of the stats leader for both of these teams, for Minnesota, their top goal scorer is Darwin Quintero, but he's only got 10 goals this season, and there was a large part of the season where he basically went on a drought of not scoring goals, and there was even times of the season that he didn't even crack the starting 11 and in some way kind of got benched by Adrian Heath throughout the season, and that he definitely wasn't as potent as he was last season when he came to this Minnesota team and just completely change their attack and make their attack much more dangerous than they have ever been. Now, in terms of their top assist leader is Jan Gregus with 12 assists, and Gregus, alongside with some of the off-season signing that Minnesota has, like Iko Para and Ozzy Alonso, Jan Gregus, in terms of the Minnesota getting this as their third DP, they absolutely hit the right buttons in terms of getting him, because he has just been an absolute monster in terms of that midfield. And knowing the fact that he's a top assist leader with 12 assists this season, you can also say that he is a creative player, even though I'm pretty sure when they bought Jan Gregus, they didn't expect him to be kind of like a creative player and a guy that is kind of more really kind of be a holding midfielder and trying to hold the lines of a defense that we thought was going to be just once again absolutely terrible like the last couple of seasons. Now, the top shots leaders for Minnesota is Darwin Quintero with 81 shots. And going back to Jan Gregus, of why I think he's been kind of more of an attacking player is because Ozzy Alonso is there. Like, Ozzy Alonso is literally a guy that I think he is going to go down as one of the best, if not the best, defensive midfielder we've ever seen in the league. And that he's been proving so many times when he was with the Seattle Sounders of how he just adds in a lot of protection in terms of the midfield and the back line. And that it basically allowed his midfield partner to go upfield without worrying the fact that, if his other midfield gets caught out of position, that then their team is going to be short in terms of going to the back. That's not what Ozzy Alonso is, and that he basically just kind of hold the line and is also an example of why Minnesota defense has been very, very potent and just downright looks scary this season in terms of how good their defense is. I mean, this season they only gave up like 43 goals this season, which I think is one of the best in the Western Conference, if not the second best defense in the Western Conference behind LAFC. And then in terms of the most foul committed is actually Angelino Rodriguez with 43 fouls committed this season, and I have a feeling he could be sold at the end of the year by Minnesota, because he has really kind of felt out of favor, and that, if there is kind of some DP moves that Minnesota has just got completely wrong, yeah, Angelino Rodriguez is one of them, where he just never fulfilled the promise that a lot of Loons fans hope that he could be a goal scorer, but that of course has not been the case this season. Now, in terms of goalkeeper save and shutout, is Vito Manone with 129 saves and 11 shutouts. And I think if it wasn't for some of the top goalkeeper like Brad Guzan or Stefan Fried or even Bill Hamid and Sean Johnson, Vito Manone will definitely be in discussion of goalkeeper of the year. In fact, I feel like he probably should deserve some kind of honorable mention and also some nomination in terms of being the goalkeeper of the year, because he has just been an amazing goalkeeper, and that you just seen so many times this season that he is one of the reasons why even when Minnesota does look a little bit shaky at the back, he's been able to make a couple of big saves to make sure that even when the defense look bad, he of course would bail them out with some of those good saves. So, I won't be surprised if he of course might win goalkeeper of the year. They haven't really announced who exactly is going to win goalkeeper of the year, but he certainly does get a big shout in terms of the fact that he has some of the most save in MLS this season, and the 11 shutout is also some of the most shutout we have seen so far in MLS. Now, in terms of the Galaxy, their top goal scorer, no surprise, is Zlatan Ibrahimovic with 30 goals, and he actually finished second in the Golden Boot race just behind Carlos Vela. And that, can you believe, a couple of years ago when the record in terms of the single goal score record is at 27, and that literally a couple of years or 1 year after Joseph Martinez broke that mark, we have now had two guys that is able to reach that 27 plus goal echelon, and that nowadays it seemed like even if you get more than 27 goals, which was supposed to be the benchmark in terms of you guarantee of winning the Golden Boot, now that of course isn't the case anymore, and that I have a feeling with MLS nowadays being kind of a more attacking league, and teams are really trying to get some of those best attacking player as possible. Don't be surprised, we're going to continue to see goals not only go up, but players are going to score like 25 plus goal and 30 plus goal this season. Top assist leader is Christian Pavone with 8 assists. I mean, he has really been a revelation to this Galaxy team, and that, there was definitely a lot of hype surrounded when he, of course, come to MLS and joined this Galaxy team, and that a lot of people thought that he was going to really be that player that is going to be a difference maker in terms of being a good central attacking mid player, and that is exactly the case. I mean, during his short time with the Galaxy, he's have already bagged in 8 assists, and he's been kind of the guy that has really caused problem and kind of didn't make this Galaxy team very one-dimensional. Like, before Pavone, they were a very one-dimensional team with them just keep lofting the ball to Zlatan and hope it will work. But now with Pavone able to dribble across a couple of defenders and use his pace on the wing area, he has really made another threat for this Galaxy attack that has already looked very scary to begin with. Then, in terms of the top shots leader, is Zlatan Ibrahimovic with 151 shots taken, which I think that's the second most shots that we have seen a player taken behind Carlos Vela. Then, the most foul committed is actually Zlatan with 51 fouls committed this season, and I'm not quite sure should I be surprised or not surprised by this. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be that surprised that Zlatan owns the most foul committed this season, because there's been a couple of times where he has definitely done some very shady stuff on the pitch, and that he has committed fouls that you would think that it should deserve a red card, and yet somehow, in some way, I don't think this season he has ever got sent off once this season, with the way that some of those fouls clearly should have been a red card, and some of them was just ugly elbow that even broke one of the player's skull. So yeah, I mean, I guess there shouldn't be that big of a surprise that Zlatan, of course, had 51 fouls, because he always played with a chip on his shoulder, and that he always wants to be the aggressor when he's on the pitch. Now, in terms of goalkeeper saves and shutout, David Bingham with 141 save and 8 shutout, and the 141 save is actually the most save in MLS by any goalkeeper. And as much as as a Quakes fan, I am still not happy about what David Bingham did a couple of years ago, and we will basically continue to call him a Judas because of the fact that he decided to switch allegiance and decided to just kind of be a traitor and left for the Galaxy. But I will say this, you gotta have to respect the way that he has been making a lot of saves. And although, he hasn't been perfect and that he has had moments where he looked like an awful goalkeeper, and it was great that the Quakes in the end eventually let him go, there's also times where he has been bailed out this Galaxy defense, which I will get to the fact that maybe that is going to be the ultimate downfall of why the Galaxy are not going to win this and make a deep run into the playoffs. Then you got Matt Lampson that played one game and he actually made 3 saves, and actually that's wrong. He didn't actually got that shutout in his only start. He did, of course, concede, I believe, 4 goals in the only game that he played. So, yeah, that, of course, is wrong. It shouldn't says 1 right there. But in terms of the last 5 games for both of these teams, for Minnesota, they did lose 1-0 to Seattle on the road on decision day. They did drew LAFC at home 1-1. Then they won 2-1 against SKC, and that was, of course, the game that basically confirmed their first ever playoff position in their franchise history. And they drew 0-0 to Portland on the road before winning 3-1 against RSL. Now, for the Galaxy, we know what happened in the last 2 games, and it is very, very ugly with the way that they have played in the last 2 games. By first losing to the team that they lost, and was the team that they basically choked their chances of making the playoffs last season, as once again they lost to the Dynamo 4-2 on decision day. Then they took even a more embarrassing loss by playing against the worst team in the league. Well, one of the worst team in the league, but the worst team in the Western Conference, and yet somehow they still shipped 4 goals against that team that is also the worst team in terms of goal scoring in the Western Conference, and lost 4-3 in that game. They did win 2-1 against RSL on the road, won 2-1 against Montreal at home before winning 7-2 against SKC in a game that was the game when Zlatan, of course, got his hat trick, and I think the Galaxy scored 6 goals in the second half. Now, in terms of head-to-head matchup, so far it seemed like the head-to-head matchup in this meeting has been very one-sided, and that only the Galaxy is able to win in terms of the head-to-head. There's been 6 meetings between both of these teams. The last meeting earlier this season, it was a 0-0 draw between Minnesota and the Galaxy at Allianz Field. Before the Galaxy, of course, win 3-2 against Minnesota. They won 3-1 against Minnesota last year in the meeting in Minneapolis, and then they drew, of course, 2-2 against the Loons at home. Won 3-0 against Minnesota before in the first ever meeting they were able to win 2-1 against the Loons. So again, the Galaxy, they're definitely favorites in terms of the head-to-head meeting, and that Minnesota, if they want to get past the Galaxy and make even more history in terms of moving to the second round of the playoffs for the first time in their franchise history, they need to also make the history of able to beat the Galaxy for the first time in their franchise history. Now, injuries for the Galaxy, there are 2 guys that is going to be questionable in this game, and it's Alessandrini and Kitchen. I doubt that both of these guys would play because I haven't seen a lot of Roman Alessandrini ever since he kind of came back in September, and I guess he kind of got kept out because since Pavone was playing so well that it's kind of really kept Alessandrini on the bench, even though he should be back in terms of the leg injury that he suffered earlier in this season. And Perry Kitchen, of course, he's been kept out because Joe Corona has been really good in that position, and that he's kind of been relegated as a bench duty the person because of that. Now, for Minnesota, they do not have any injury to concern heading into this game. And in terms of the home record for Minnesota, it's one of the best in the league, as they, of course, won 10 games, drew 6 games, and lost only once at Allianz Field. And the only loss that they suffered was way back earlier in the season, I believe back in May when they suffer a 3-2 loss against Philadelphia. Well, the Galaxy, their road record is okay. I mean, they did win five games, drew 2, but lost 10 games this season on the road. So this is a team that doesn't draw a lot on the road, but they do win a fair amount of road games, but they also lost a lot of road games this season. And that, I know a lot of people want the Galaxy to win this game, and I believe when I look at the league website, when they talk about the fans' votes in terms of who exactly is the favorites and who they want to move on in terms of the next round, a lot of people picked the Galaxy. I believe it was 68% of people picked the Galaxy to move on into the next round over Minnesota, and that I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of people want to see El Tráfico in the conference semifinal, and that, you know, that is gonna be like, if El Tráfico was crazy in the regular season, I can imagine how the postseason is gonna be. And as a neutral, I definitely want to see that happen. Like, that's, if you thought Portland versus Seattle last year in the postseason was crazy, oh, this is about to go down even more crazy if the Galaxy play against LAFC, and especially the fact that, you know, if both of those teams meet each other in a playoff kind of game, man, tempers are just going to really explode. And that, you know, I expect that game to be probably the craziest game I have ever seen in the playoffs, with the way that, you know, in past El Tráfico, it has just been crazily insane, and there have just been some crazy events that happened during those games. And, you know, like I said, I understand a lot of people want that, but here's the thing. One thing that I am really concerned about the Galaxy potentially move on into the next round, and the reason why, if I would pick this game, I would go with Minnesota in terms of getting past the Galaxy. And one of the biggest reason why I think Minnesota is going to get past the Galaxy is that this Galaxy defense is just as leaky as it gets. I mean, they have conceded 59 goals so far this season, which is the most by any team in the playoffs that is currently in the playoffs this season. And when you look at the last two, resort of the fact that, you know, they of course gave up goals against teams that don't usually score a lot, and that while Minnesota is another one of those teams that usually don't score a lot of goals. In fact, I think one of the biggest problem that Minnesota is facing, and that I think a lot of Loons fans are kind of aware of the problem this team heading into the playoffs, is goal scoring. I mean, 10 goals in the last 10 games is definitely not a good kind of sign in terms of being a team that goes into the playoffs and make a deep run when you have that kind of goal scoring record. But at the same time, you know, the Galaxy themselves, 8 goals conceded in the last 2 games, and to teams that are not even known for their attacking power. Something tells me if that is going to be the display against a Minnesota team that, while they don't have a lot of attacking power, they still have some dangerous weapon going forward with the likes of Quintero and Mason Toy and even Ethan Finley, and that if they are going to give them space in the defensive end, then this game could really get very ugly. And that, you know, the Galaxy will just have to, you know, I just have a feeling if the Galaxy are going to make a deep run, they are probably going to try to outscore team throughout the playoffs, and that is definitely not a recipe for making a deep run. In fact, I think I've seen many teams that tried to do that in the playoffs. It just does not work whatsoever. And the reason why it does not work in the playoffs is because goal scoring in the playoffs tends to be lower, and that it does get much tighter than you would see in the regular season, where defense, of course, gets tighter, and that teams that usually have a good goal scoring form in the regular season, well, in the postseason, when they aren't able to of course score those goals because the games are getting much tighter, and that, you know, if they don't do a good job in terms of defending and gave up key goals in key scenario, then they could easily find themselves getting eliminated. So yeah, you know, the defense, I just don't trust this Galaxy defense whatsoever, even though they're facing a relatively weak kind of Minnesota attack. And that the other thing that I also so worry about the Galaxy is that, as I talk about in the beginning with Zlatan, I know a lot of people are going to say that he's going to have a monster game, but the question is, that's just kind of an assumption, and that, we'll see if he's going to really kind of have a monster game, and that if he's going to have a monster game, he's going to really have to have it against arguably the league's best defensive team this season, and that he's going to have to face the likes of Iko Opara, who, by the way, he actually won the Defender of the Year, and I'm pretty sure somewhere in Children Mercy Park and somewhere in Kansas City, a lot of SKC fans are probably sobbing, knowing the fact that they, of course, gave away their best player in the offseason, and that he, of course, won Defender of the Year after that season. Like, I always say that when SKC traded Iko Opara for $1 million, while it kind of worked out for SKC because they earn a lot of money off of that trade, at the same time, sometimes money doesn't usually kind of like, just because you get a big sum of money after you sell one of your best players, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you are going to win that trade and that you're going to kind of go off with a pretty good deal out of this. And that, while Minnesota did pay a fortune in terms of getting Iko Opara, it seemed like after the year that he's been having, which is worthy of a Defender of the Year award, that $1 million seems like just an absolute bargain right now. And that, if Iko Opara is still at SKC right now, there is no doubt that SKC defense would not be as disaster as it is. And that because Iko Opara is now with Minnesota, with the addition of Ozzy Alonso in the midfield, and also they got Roma Metinier over the season and Vito Monone as their goalkeeper, and that they just made so many good kind of defensive reinforcement, and that they almost pretty much hit every right buttons in terms of this defensive reinforcement. That's why this team has really become a very good defensive team, and that, as much as the Galaxy in terms of their attack being just incredible, they are about to face a defense that is just like none other than any team that they have faced so far this regular season, and that just makes me a little bit concerned. And that there's also the old cliche of the fact that defense win championship. Well, it seemed like Minnesota is basically going to take that standpoint, and that if this Loons defense is as good as what we saw throughout the year, I have a feeling this could be a low-scoring game, and a low-scoring game clearly does not favor the Galaxy, especially the fact that now, if this is kind of like a 1-0 or if this is a 0-0 game heading into the second half, I would be very concerned if you're a Galaxy fan, because your defense is going to eventually crack, and once that defense crack, then that could really be a very issue, because now the crowd, of course, would be going absolutely nuts, which, by the way, this game, I have a feeling not only Minnesota is going to, a lot of these players are going to be very hyped up about this game, and it's going to give 110% coming into this one against the Galaxy, but the fans are going to give their 110%, and that Allianz Field crowd is basically going to be like the 12-man, and that is going to be one of the way that is going to try to carry this Minnesota team to victory. And if the Galaxy aren't able to silence that crowd and instead make the crowd really crazy after conceding a goal, they could be in serious trouble heading into this game. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. By far, this was the longest preview that I've done, because, I want to save the best for last, and usually for the last ever preview, I want to go dive in a little bit deeper into this game. And then I think of all the match that I will want to see this weekend, this is definitely one of my top 3, because of the fact that, I want to see how Zlatan does in the postseason, but I also want to see how Minnesota does for their first ever playoff appearance, and how can they, of course able to continue to have a fairy tale season and upsetting the Galaxy in this game to move on into the second round of the playoffs. But either way, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Like I said, leave your comment below. What do you think the prediction of this game is going to be? And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.